Welcome to the Friday Happy Hour with victory strategist, award-winning author and your happy hour host, Annmarie Kelly. Each week, Annmarie chats with women who have reinvented, started over or wrote fabulous next chapters. They share how they overcame their midlife challenges and how you can too. So kick back with some good happy hour something to drink and enjoy today's show.
To the Friday Happy Hour with me, Annmarie Kelly. I'm that recovering good girl and your victorious woman empowerment partner. This is the place where us victory chicks and you men who care about us meet on Fridays to wrap up the work week and find ways to live more powerfully and make our lives sparkle. Thanks for coming today. As always, I'm really glad you did. You know, a lot of you victory chicks and you guys know what it's like to come back from divorce. You question your decisions, push yourself to keep going, and do everything you can to recover your self-esteem. But I'll bet most of you didn't do it the way today's guest, Kelly Green, did it. She got back in the game through a year-long period of rediscovery she calls the year of dating dangerously. And she did that with all kinds of men, including Alex Rodriguez, and Leonardo, she didn't date Leonardo DiCaprio, but she was at his birthday party. And other people, not named people, but people, big deal people. Kelly's joining us in a few minutes for some Friday afternoon dish. And say, remember last week when I said I was taking Joseph to Knoebels amusement park for his birthday? Well, we went up on Friday night, and what a great little park that is. Well, it's not so little. Joseph kept commenting on how clean and well organized and how cheap it was. He really liked it. It was free parking, free admission, and the rides were about $1.50 a ride. That's a good deal. And now, I have to tell you, I'm not much for the thrill rides, so I didn't get on the wooden roller coaster or any of those things. But I did think about going on the water slide, because it was tall, but not hugely tall. But Joseph wouldn't go on it with me, and I was scared to go alone. But we did this like umbrella ride where you get in and the umbrella goes up and, and around and stuff. And they had a 100-year-old carousel. And then there was this train ride through the forest, which would have been good on its own. But kids who had been on it before and knew the fun things to do, like what noises to make going through the tunnels, well, they did all that, and that just made it hysterical fun. And on our way there, I wondered if we would have been the only couple without kids. But you know what? It was Friday night. So it was like date night. And there were lots of other date night couples. And we weren't even the oldest date night couple. And that'll give you an idea of how popular and fun this place is. And if you want to see me riding the carousel, it was 100 years old. It was like something you see in the movies. Well, I posted a picture of it on today's radio wrap-up at victoriouswoman.com. Me riding one of those horses that go up and down, and you could even get the ring, the brass ring. I didn't because I was sitting on one of the horses that go up and down, but the outside people, they were able to get the brass ring. Well, Knoebels closes about 10 o'clock, so when it did, we drove about 20 minutes north to a town called Danville where we stayed overnight. And the next morning we drove to Wellsboro and the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon. Did you even know we had a Grand Canyon here in Pennsylvania? Now, it's nothing like the one in Arizona, but it's pretty spectacular for a mini version in north central Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania Grand Canyon is the Pine Creek Gorge that sits between two state parks, Colton State Park and Leonard Harrison State Park. And what a view! And if it's spectacular in August, I can only imagine what it looks like during the fall foliage, which the locals say is the peak time. We made reservations because I know it would be easier to make them now than it would be even a month from now. Now, I'm not sure we're going to be able to go, but I would like to because it really was special. And on Saturday, we hiked up something called the Turkey Path, which is one very steep, 1 mile down path to the gorge. And I can tell you, if you think 1 mile steep down to the gorge is tough. It's an even steeper mile coming back up. Excuse me. And if you like forest hikes, it's a good one with waterfalls. But personally, and maybe I'm spoiled by hiking in Acadia National Park in Maine, I want to see more than forest. I need that big prize at the end of the trail, kind of motivation to keep me hiking. In any place I go, I have to have a big payoff to be hiking. But the turkey path was doable except for one thing. I slipped on my way down and strained my arm. Actually, according to my muscle therapist's spouse, I hurt some soft tissue. No, I actually don't know the difference, but he says he does, and he says it's better. No difference to me, pain's pain, and a few Advil later I kept going, but for the long term, I do know soft tissue damage is easier to heal. And I'm lucky that Joseph can work on it and facilitate the healing, and he did. But here's something. I fell because of my hiking boots, which I didn't know until last weekend have worn out treads. In fact, I didn't even know they were worn out. The fact that I didn't even know that they were worn out got me thinking that things that we do, excuse me, as we get older and, time moves a little faster, and we don't even realize that something's worn out. We don't even notice, but maybe we should. So I wrote a tips article about it, excuse me, and posted it on today's radio wrap-up at victoriouswoman.com. I posted a link to it. We drove home once. We stayed Saturday and Sunday in the Grand Canyon. We drove home Sunday afternoon. Now, I say we, but actually I was nursing that sore arm, so Joseph drove and I navigated, sort of. Joseph's car has a dashboard GPS. And have you ever noticed, maybe you do this, even though you know the GPS is a computer, you imbue it with human qualities? Well, Joseph's GPS has some German woman calling all the shots, and I think Joseph's in love with her. He turns her on and does whatever she tells him to do. And he does it without question. He doesn't do that with me. And Joseph doesn't have the best sense of direction, so often enough, I know GPS lady is not going the best way. I'm a map person. Remember maps? The paper ones? I don't think GPS lady is the best at maps, but that does not stop her from shouting orders. So GPS lady and I disagree a lot. And GPS lady has caused more than one shouting match between Joseph and me. And I do have a GPS when I plug into what used to be called the cigarette lighter. And mine originally had a male voice. At first I thought he was cute, but then I started noticing that I was cranky and a little stressed when I turned him on. And that was worse than getting lost. So after a while, I finally figured it out. And this might not surprise you. I was getting cranky because some man I didn't know was telling me what to do. And he wasn't always right, so I didn't trust him. Nothing like having to take orders from a man who doesn't have a good track record for being right. You know what I mean. You probably had a boss or somebody like that in your life, right? It's annoying. But fortunately, my GPS is transgender, so GPS man became GPS woman. So I can listen to her now, except that's not my favorite navigation. My favorite navigation is on my phone, and it's not the phone's own navigation app, but Waze. Do you know Waze? It's W-A-Z-E, and it's a free app for your phone or your iPad. You just download it, and when you do, you meet the Waze lady, who won't just give you the route. She'll tell you when there's a traffic jam, how to avoid the traffic jam, when there's a car on the side of the road, where the next gas station is, all kinds of interesting information. Last Sunday, GPS lady and Waze lady had a little disagreement over directions, and Waze lady won because she found the most interesting routes off the interstates, on the back roads, and through the small towns. And we took those until we got to Reading and picked up the turnpike. The route was much more relaxing and got us home in about the same amount of time as taking the interstates. And if you don't have Waze yet, and you have an iPhone or some kind of Android, find the app, and I posted a link to that on today's radio wrap-up. Anyway, during our 4-hour ride, Joseph and I listened to CDs and a couple of news shows, and we also talked a bit. And I have a really good story about my friend John, who maybe I'll talk to you about him next week, because Fred just gave me the high sign and told me it's just about time for us to go. And I'm excited to talk to this guy, John, and I'll tell you why later. But right now, I'm just as excited to have you hear from our guest today, Kelly Green. I invited Kelly because I was intrigued by the way she got, by the big way she got back into the dating scene after her divorce. And I want to talk with her about her experience and dish a little bit about the celebrity she met. So go get some good happy hour something to drink. And you're going to want a glass of wine for this. Because when you meet Kelly Green, you'll understand why. So go do that now and then come back. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour. When you wished you had more time for yourself, and now you have it, but you notice you're keeping busy with stuff, but that stuff isn't making you feel happy or filled up? And when you think about what would make you happy and filled up, you get stuck or feel overwhelmed. And then you go back to what's more familiar, more comfortable, even if it's not making you happy. Wouldn't you love to find a way to start making sense of that deep discontent you're feeling? Well, you're not alone. I'm Annmarie Kelly, author, victory strategist, and the radio show host of the Friday Happy Hour. And I know there's a place for you, one that other women have found to be both inspirational and empowering. And it's the Victorious Woman Project. Go there now and get on my mailing list, where you'll be the first to know about my upcoming online workshops, teleseminars, and more. And while you're there, take a couple minutes to look over my blog. You can download some of the free stuff I have for you and let it get your creative juices going. I'm looking forward to meeting you at the Victorious Woman Project. And that's at www.victoriouswoman.com. Welcome back to the Friday Happy Hour. I'm your host, Annmarie Kelly, and I'm here with Kelly Green. Hey, Kelly, welcome to you.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. Are you in Beverly Hills right now? Did you?
I am. I'm in Beverly Hills right now.
Are you doing something good?
Well, something fun.
What are you doing?
I don't know if it's good, but it's fun. Well, I have a little week off from my kids. They are with my ex-husband this week, and so I'm kind of making a long trip of a little bit of visiting friends and a little bit of work and just exploring, getting some new experiences.
Very nice. And you're good about doing that. You're good about finding new experiences.
I try.
Yeah. Listen, Kelly, I was reading your book, Back in the Game, My Year of Dating Dangerously, and one of the first things I thought about was another era where socialites would have had huge parties. You know, actually their parents would have had the parties, but they were called coming out parties to announce to eligible men in their social circle that the young women were available for dating and marriage. And you were a guest at Leonardo DiCaprio's 39th birthday and said it was your coming out party. How so?
Well, it certainly felt that way to me. You know, I was kind of just coming out of the end of a 10-year marriage, and I hadn't, gone on a date or, attempted to think about what I wanted from a relationship or even dating, and really hadn't even, had a conversation or flirted with a man yet. And so I really felt like that party was kind of a big opening or a big debut for me, even though, really it was his birthday party.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know what? I want my listeners to hear more about that because you tell such good stories. But first I want to back up and to before that party. Now, you're in your mid-40s now, and we're married for about 10 years when you got divorced. Was that a first marriage for you?
It was. Yeah, it was my first marriage. I got married when I was around 30, and lasted a little bit over 10 years, 10 to 11 years.
And you had a bunch of kids.
We do. We have 4 beautiful children, really blessed with just amazing, healthy children, and have fared well through the divorce and the changes that we've gone through. And, that certainly helps, I think, when you're navigating a divorce to have that piece stable and have, good, healthy children and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So fortunate there.
And you have twins. My spouse is a twin.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, I have 8-year-old twins, or 8 now, a boy and a girl. And then I have another daughter who's now 6 and another son who's now 4. But at the time of the divorce, he was about 18 months, maybe 2 years, as I'm going through the adventures in the book.
And you had a career before you got married, but when you got married, were you a stay-at-home mom?
There were times that I took about 8 or 9 months off, but I typically went back to work somewhere in between there. And then certainly after the divorce, I continued that same career and kind of accelerated that more so now.
And you know what, Kelly, you said something in your book that Back in the Game that I think a lot of people can identify with. You and your family seemed on the outside, and this is your quote, to embody the perfect modern family. What did that mean to you?
Well, I think, growing up, and maybe particularly in the South, you look at marriage, or you look at women, paving the way before you, and you have an external view of what marriage should look like, or what would be the epitome, and you think certain things like having a nice house, or having a nice car, or, multiple children, all of those pieces in place are the foundation for a happy marriage, or what it should be, and it's really not. It's much more internal, and those external things seem perfect, but really, there were certainly cracks in my marriage, and those elements don't make for a perfect life, and certainly not a perfect marriage.
In Victorious Woman speak, I call that being a good girl. And I got over that, and I think by now you've gotten over it too, huh?
Certainly. It took me this year. I wouldn't, I'll open myself up for judgment to not be a good girl, but yes, that's true.
And you said from the South. You're from Texas, right?
Correct, yeah.
Born and raised?
I was born in Texas, and, I lived in San Francisco for 8 or 9 years after college, but then when I was pregnant with the twins, moved back to Texas, and have been there since.
So you said some things I thought were really poignant. That you said that you got absorbed into the patterns and routines of marriage, and that you lost your identity in an oppressive partnership. What did that look and feel like to you?
Well, I think, women can fall into a trap of thinking or going down the path of certain things might make me a perfect wife or make for a good relationship. And those things can be anything from, maintaining our beauty and fitness to, being a perfect hostess and throwing the most amazing birthday party, or, gardening, whatever, certainly all those things are enjoyable and good for us as well, as long as you're doing them with the right intention. But I think what a lot of times happens is you might be doing those things thinking that they might please your partner, when really those things are probably not as important to your partner as they are to you.
And I think that's really true. And you write something, and I'm quoting you now, I wasn't honest with myself and didn't acknowledge that I needed more. And, Kelly, that more is something I hear from women, especially women in midlife, because I think by the time we get to midlife, we've done all that good girl stuff, and we didn't get the big payoff that we thought we were going to get.
Right.
And so we say that we want more, but more is different for everybody else. In your life, what was the more you needed?
I think that's kind of what I went on this journey trying to figure out what more was. I think, females tend to put, our children, our spouses, our parents, our careers, a lot of things before us, and you tend to kind of get yourself drowned out as far as what is important to you, and it's hard to know what that more is unless you really think about it and dig deep, and then once you figure it out, aren't afraid to ask for it or really even, demand it in your life.
And sometimes I think that we keep ourselves so busy that we don't have time to figure out what the more is. Don't you think that that's true?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think, distraction is also just a great way to avoid vulnerability, and just not being vulnerable in your relationship, or, being open and saying, hey, I'm doing all these things, but this is what I really need. And no matter what that is, you shouldn't be afraid to ask for it.
And I don't think, as women, I think that we're really socialized not to ask.
Yeah, certainly in the South.
Oh, yeah, especially. A little in here in the Northeast, we're a little bit more aggressive. And even when I say aggressive, that's sort of tongue-in-cheek, because I don't think that we are necessarily. But compared to you Southern girls, we are.
Yeah, we are. I mean, honestly, I think all women are afraid to ask, and sometimes, particularly if a financial situation in a marriage is off balance, if you have, the husband working and the wife not working, perhaps there's some sort of the equality there isn't in place, and they just might be afraid to ask for what they want, not just financially, but just what makes them happy in life.
You said something that to piggyback on that I so agree with. because I often say that marriage is the hardest thing I've ever done. And when I say it, people think I'm having marriage problems or that I'm not happy, and that's not it. And the way that you wrote it was, to quote you, the truth of the matter is that marriage is hard at the best of times. Do you think that's something that the average couple doesn't believe or recognize until, like, they're in it?
Certainly, I think in your youth you go into it. No one goes into marriage, thinking, wow, my parents are going to get sick one day, my spouse is going to get sick one day, we're both going to lose our jobs one day, or, we're going to have to move from one city to another. You don't really think about a lot of the life challenges that occur throughout a marriage, and you don't really understand the depths of personal relationships, habits, the emotions that you bring from your childhood and growing up, and how you navigate and compromise and support each other, in all of those pieces. And, the love certainly has to be there, but sometimes, it can be hard as well. It takes a conscious effort. And, it may sound negative to term it as hard or difficult, but you can't just skate through it, is more my point,
Yeah, and I think, like, in the back of our minds, we would all like to be able to skate through it.
For sure.
We're
much more fun that way.
Yeah, we're looking for that happily ever after, and everything's going to be rosy and, that kind of stuff. It just, real life isn't like that, so how could our relationship be like that?
Right.
So, but you were going along day by day, and then something happened. You saw a text to your spouse, and you said something that I can't even tell you how many women say this to me. In that moment, they knew nothing would ever be the same. So what was it that happened?
Well, I minimize this piece in the book a lot about infidelity and what happens when you see a text message and what that leads to. For me personally, I've come to believe that infidelity is more a symptom of the end of the relationship rather than the actual cause. It might be the compelling event, but I certainly believe that couples and marriages can survive infidelity, but from that point forward, definitely nothing is the same as it was. For me, it cracked my bubble. It was the crack in the clear pain that I thought I was living in, and as painful as it was, I think it needed to happen.
And don't you even hate saying that it needed to happen?
I do, and I shouldn't say it needed to, but a lot of the things that I learned throughout the year was, I could have taken the position at that point as being a victim and, oh my gosh, this happened to me. This is the worst thing. How could he do this to me? And I certainly think that you should allow yourself some time to feel that and mourn that. But it also gives you kind of an opportunity, I guess, is the way I'm trying to phrase that it needed to happen. It was more, when it did happen, it opened up a lot of venues, a lot of different views as to life for me.
And it sounds, from reading back in the game, it sounds like your divorce must have been amicable and you share custody of your children easily. Is that correct? Yeah.
When we were getting divorced, after the incident, we kind of tried to work on the marriage for the following year. And, at that time, we both went through a lot of therapy and learned a lot about ourselves and moved forward. And, the interesting time through that year was the more I did show up and did say, hey, this is what I want and this is what I need, the weaker he became and kind of reverted back to those actions. And so at some point, you call it, and at that point, we both were very strong in believing that the children were our priority and wanting to make this transition as easy for them as possible. And for me personally, I felt like a quick divorce was much better than a long divorce. And I know some people like to take baby steps, but I personally had some friends experience that, was a multi-year divorce, which brings in a lot of different emotions through that time, and so I took the attitude of, hey, you can always get remarried, but let's, take care of our paperwork and then sort everything else out later.
So then there you are, Kelly, as the single mother of 4, and you had to put your life back together. We're going to need to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to start with your coming out party at Leonardo DiCaprio's 39th birthday party. So everybody stay close, and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour.
Hi, this is Annmarie Kelly, author, victory strategist, and the radio show host of the Friday Happy Hour. I trust you're enjoying my conversation with this fabulous, victorious woman. If you're getting inspired with ideas and feeling empowered, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's more for you. Tips, downloads, resources at the Victorious Woman Project. Go to victoriouswoman.com and look around and get on my mailing list so you can be the first to know about the newest good things I have for you. That's www.victoriouswoman.com.
Welcome back to the Friday Happy Hour. I'm your host, Annmarie Kelly, and I'm here with Kelly Green. So, Kelly.
Yeah.
What was a girl from Texas? So this party was in New York.
This party actually was in Manhattan.
And so, what was a girl from Texas you were living in Austin, right?
Correct, yeah. I live in Austin, Texas, and, I think I really am kind of just an average kind of suburban mom, and I had a friend of a friend who had gotten an invitation to this party, and, I think when you're going through something like this, there's a lot of people that around you that are willing to take care of you and do things for you if you allow them. And so I went with a friend to this party, and it was really last minute, like literally less than 24 hours notice. And she flew us out there and went to Manhattan. And this particular friend that took me is a really good friend and wanted to make sure that I felt pampered and taken care of. And so not only did she take us there, but she had Barney's kind of set us up with some dresses and hair and makeup and that sort of thing. And so it was just a really feel-good it really did feel like a coming out party, in that kind of putting myself back together again and getting back out there.
Don't you love having girlfriends like that?
It is amazing. I mean, it really is. And I try to stress that throughout my book. You'll notice that almost all of my adventures, I am with girlfriends or, visiting a girlfriend or on a girls' trip. And I just can't stress enough how important that is in my life and how they've just, always been there for me and just kind of wrapped me in comfort.
Which is wonderful. It's wonderful to have those kinds of friends.
Yeah.
But as I was reading that whole story about how you, like in 24 hours, you got flown to New York. Did you travel in that kind of social circle in Austin?
Austin's a pretty laid-back town, and so it's not like there is a Manhattan, type of social circle. Mm-hmm. But there's certainly people that with means that can do special things for people at special times, and they're generous. So yeah. But I would not say going to Leonardo's, birthday is a norm for me at all.
I know. I have a girlfriend who lives in Austin. She lives. Her goal is to live right in town. She lived in Round Rock, but she just moved to Georgetown as an interim move, and the next move will be right into the city of Austin. Your city's beautiful. I love it.
Thank you.
And we laugh about the fact that even compared to Philadelphia, Austin is just it's way more laid back, and
it's very laid back.
Yeah, and it's, even if it in its hot places, it's laid back compared to Philadelphia or New York.
Definitely.
So there you were, this girl from Texas. You're in Manhattan. You have Barney. Somebody puts in these dresses from Barney's. You said that the dress you were wearing was tight and shorter than one you've ever worn. How nervous were you?
Pretty nervous. I mean, I hadn't gotten that dressed up in such a long time, and at that age, you want to make sure that you're dressing age appropriate, and all of this. But the stylists and people there were so comforting and reassuring, and how great we all looked and that sort of thing. But it definitely made me, I would say, fidgety. I was just already unknown and kind of uncomfortable about going to the party, and It wasn't so much the celebrities at the party, just the anticipation of knowing that I was going to be in a social, scene with single men again, and what did that look like? How was I going to respond?
Mm-hmm. And when you described Leonardo DiCaprio's birthday, when I read it, and you say this, but even before you said it, it sounded very Great Gatsby-ish.
For sure, yeah.
So what were some of the things that were there that made it like that?
I think that Leonardo DiCaprio is just an amazing philanthropist, really, when it comes down to it. You see all these celebrity photos of him at his parties and things like that, but what you don't realize, and this particular party was the same, is that his birthday party was a fundraiser for his foundation, and so he kind of, is sure to orchestrate something for everyone. And so, certainly he has these, bevy of beautiful models, successful businessmen, and, entrepreneurs who are there to raise the funds, and they're just bidding on champagne. And so, he was able to raise a lot of money. But it's just well planned out, well orchestrated. He's, has his table in the middle of the party where Kanye West and 2 Chainz played, and, he's a great host, and you had a smile on his face the entire time. So it was a good time.
So who were some of the celebrities that you met? Did you meet Kanye? And Kim was there, right?
Yep. I didn't meet them, but they were sitting at the table just to our left, and they had just had their first baby. And so I don't know how, but she miraculously looked fresh as a daisy after having a baby just a few months ago.
Yeah, doesn't that amaze you?
It did. I was like, how is she that put together after having such a young child? But she more than pulled it off. And then he was performing, later that night. So they looked happy, though.
And you weren't you sitting next to Edward Norton?
So
our booth.
I know, what a doll, right? Yeah. Our booth was, sparse because we didn't have the celebrity gatherings. So some people would try to move into our booth area, and at one point I'm sitting at the back top area, and somebody kind of scoots in next to me, kind of trying to encroach in our space, and his thigh kind of starts touching my thigh, and this was my first, gosh, what am I doing here? I'm nervous. There's some guy touching me. His leg is touching me. I want to get him removed from the booth.
And you've been out of the dating scene for a really long time, so.
Oh, yeah. I mean, any physical contact with another man was just unnerving, really.
Yeah.
And so my friend, pointed out that it was Ed Norton, and he should really be allowed to stay in the booth. And, in fact, his leg touching mine was quite innocent. He was there with his girlfriend, and,
yeah, he wasn't even paying attention.
No, he was not paying attention to me at all. It was more my mental paranoia of what I was supposed to be doing than anything.
But who was paying attention to you was Alex Rodriguez.
He was. So,
but you know what? You say in the book you didn't even know A-Rod, right?
I didn't. I mean, obviously I've spent some time in Manhattan, but I don't follow sports that closely. And if someone said his name, I would definitely know who he was, from dating women and things like that, Madonna and, Kate Hudson and Cameron Diaz, whatnot. But I wouldn't recognize his face, walking down the street. And so when my friend brought him over to the booth and introduced us, I thought I was just kind of meeting this really, handsome, charming man. So it took me a little while to discern who I was actually meeting.
And then how did that encounter go? Like, you write that you're swapping recipes. Like, what kind of recipes did you swap with A-Rod?
Well, he was so charming, and I guess you would probably expect that he would be, but extremely grounded and real. It wasn't like a Rico Suave type of situation. He was very engaging and immediately just kind of makes you feel like you're the only woman in the room. And I don't have to say enough about his eyes. We all know his entrancing eyes. And he just quickly dove into what I liked, and we began talking about cooking, and I think, obviously being an athlete, he's health conscious, and I like to eat paleo, and so it was ridiculous. We were talking about crock pot recipes and healthy eating at Leonardo's birthday.
I think that's so funny. What do you think about him leaving baseball?
He kind of, he didn't talk a lot about baseball at that time, but I kind of got the feeling that he might be ready for it. And I think everyone, and certainly men, kind of mature into different places in their life. And I think he's maturing into a new place in his life. And while it might be the end of being with this team on the field, I think he's going to be a major force in sports moving forward, just maybe in a different role with a different face.
Yeah, you know what, Kelly, you could be right, and because I thought, and I had emailed to you that I was at Yankee Stadium the day he tied the record, and thought once he broke the record and got a little bit past that, I really did expect him, like after you do that, you've accomplished what you want to do, so,
Yeah. But he's really bright and very articulate, obviously very handsome, so I think he'll probably have a number of different options in the sports field rather than actually just playing. So it'll be interesting to see what he gets to do.
That encounter did not go any further. Are you glad?
Certainly at the time. I think one thing that I learned throughout the year is although when you come out of a relationship or a long marriage, you think that you're ready to date someone and you think that you're ready for these different things, but really you should take your time and kind of ease into things. And so I was at such a kind of naive and vulnerable point at that time that I think if it would have gone any further, it definitely would have been a mistake on perhaps both of our parts. So yeah, for me it turned out the best that it could for that night.
Well, Kelly, you were naive when you went to that coming out Leonardo DiCaprio's 39th birthday party, but you didn't stay that way for too much longer, because next thing you know, you were almost commuting to the Hamptons and doing. You really made a lot of that year of dating dangerously. We need to take a break. But when we come back, let's talk about your time in the Hamptons and that commute and some of the other things that you did, especially the doggy door.
Okay, great.
So everybody hang tight. We'll be back in just a minute. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour.
Are you one of those women who lived the first part of your life as a really good girl? That is, you did all the right things and followed all the so-called rules for women? I was like that too. But have you noticed that once you passed 40, you have less patience for those rules? Maybe you even think that the rules really don't make sense for you anymore. Maybe they never did and you just didn't realize it. Do you want to go where other recovering good girls meet to inspire each other and support their new empowered selves? Then join me, Annmarie Kelly, and some very fabulous victorious women. We're on Facebook at the Victorious Woman Project. So go to facebook.com/Victorious Woman Project. I'll talk to you there.
Welcome back to the Friday Happy Hour. I'm Annmarie Kelly, and we're here with Kelly Green talking about her new book, Back in the Game, My Year of Dating Dangerously. So, Kelly, you were hanging out in the Hamptons, and you were becoming something of a weekend commuter from between Texas and New York. How did that happen?
I was. I was visiting a friend who's from Austin, has a home in the Hamptons one weekend, and wound up meeting, I guess, probably one of New York's most eligible bachelors. He's a very well-off, owns a hedge fund there in the city and lives off of the park, and became kind of swept off my feet. It was my first kind of relationship after the marriage, and kind of dove in with both feet and found myself, commuting from Austin, every other weekend that I didn't have the kids, and becoming a New Yorker.
And you almost were, because he's the man who didn't he buy an apartment and wanted to move you and the kids to New York?
He did. He was at the time living at the 1 Central Park South, and he was buying another home and was kind of building in, and really was willing to take care of me and really wanting to take in, my family and be a part of that and make that all happen. And throughout that relationship, this is certainly a piece that I had to become comfortable with, was allowing someone to care for me, and at the same time, finding my voice of what I like and don't like. And, I think that although most women would say that we want to be taken care of, sometimes if you are, a career-driven or independent woman, it's difficult to also find that intimacy to allow someone to take care of you and, relax into that. And so that was a lot that I had to learn through this relationship.
And I agree with you. I think that's hard because, like for me, it took me a really long time to gain that independence. I grew up in an Italian Catholic family, so even just that I moved out of my parents' house was a big disgrace to my parents. Most people think, oh, my daughter's moving, I've set her on the right path, but my parents didn't feel that way. So I had to work really hard to be that independent. And it was just as hard when I met the man that I'm married to go the other way, to allow that partnership to occur.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance, having and maintaining that independence in a lot of areas in your life, but then in your relationships still having that softness and vulnerability and really dependency,
Yeah, and when you fight really hard to be independent, going back and becoming dependent, even for small pieces, is hard.
Exactly.
And part of that is something that you say, and I think this is what scares a lot of women who are independent. I had lunch with somebody earlier this week who has been single, was married, divorced, single for a long time, and I know this is the same thing with her, that like you got back in the game because your year of dating dangerously made you realize that during your marriage you had lost yourself. I think so many women are afraid of doing that, and this woman I had lunch with was like that. What does that mean to you, losing yourself?
Well, I think what happens is we think that we're holding on to our independence because we're holding on to perhaps our career, our friends, our social, or whatever that external identifier of independence is, right? But then what happens in your actual relationship, right? Can you still be dependent and, allow someone to care for you emotionally or financially or, let go of some of the control in your life? And certainly when women have children, that control really kind of snaps up, right? Mm. It can go as far as, hey, don't wear your shoes in the baby's room or, and so to relax back into that, I think is the key. But you definitely wind up losing pieces of yourself in that struggle as well, in that you kind of forget what's important to you and what you like and what you want. Certainly when I came out of my marriage, I literally had just forgotten, what type of music I like, what was my favorite breakfast dish, would I prefer to sleep in or would I prefer to wake up? You're so much of a unit that once you're yourself again, you have to rediscover what you really like.
Yeah, because sometimes you don't even feel like you have a choice.
Exactly.
Yeah. So just two quick questions. Is there any one party or event that stands out in your mind during your year of dating dangerously?
I had a lot of, I don't know if there would be, events themselves, but certainly specific moments that I just really felt like I was becoming awake, I guess is the best way to describe it. In my marriage, I had described it somewhat as oppressive and lost myself. And, this incident happened with the infidelity and kind of cracked the bubble. And then throughout that year, I just remember having very specific moments of, I guess, just presence and clarity where I was like, wow, through all this, pain and change, good things are happening, and good things are happening for me. And, it feels good.
And one of those times you talk about, and I'm really curious about this, you talk about running through Central Park in stilettos, and you write that it this is your quote, set me on a course of positively embracing change and chasing the unfamiliar. How was that such a big deal for you, running through Central Park in stilettos?
Well, I think, one of the things about divorce is we can get in this gridlock, right? We're so afraid of the loss, right? Certainly the loss of a partnership and a marriage, the loss of perhaps friends, the loss of finances, so, just how often am I going to see my friends and that sort of thing. And that once you can kind of start to let go of that or sort out those pieces, which I'm not saying is easy, it is extremely difficult, but as you start to move past that, you'll find yourself in unusual circumstances or unusual situations. And for me, being a girl from Texas, at this point, in the year, I was kind of starting to make a mess of my life and involving too many men at one time or being confused and that sort of thing. And I had met a fabulous man that I was somewhat involved with, and we were staying at the Pierre, and I was leaving him that morning to go back to my friend who was a hedge fund guy, and so I was fighting Manhattan traffic, trying to get back to my laptop and my career, and I just kind of found myself suspended in time, running from, one fabulous man to another fabulous man in this surreal, crisp fall day in Central Park, and it was just kind of like almost out of body, like, wow, is this really happening to me? It wasn't good and it wasn't bad. It was just unfamiliar, and that much of something that's unfamiliar can really bring a presence into your life, into just that moment, it was great. I don't know. It was just really exhilarating.
Neat. Before we run out of time, and before I ask you for some tips for our listeners, there's a story that just made me laugh so hard, and it was about you trying to get into a house through the doggy door. Could you tell my listeners that story?
Yeah. So I was visiting some friends in Los Angeles, and they have a beautiful home off of Sunset Boulevard, and it's one of Diane Keaton's old homes, and it was, these gorgeous hedges, and I had met a stranger that night, and I was going out to dinner, and they were a little bit skeptical of me going out. But the husband bid us farewell, and we went on our way. And I came back later that night, and they had accidentally locked the door and locked me out. And I had a 6 a.m. flight back to Austin, and so I had a very short window to just kind of go in and grab my bags and head back to Austin. And so I'm trying to get back into the house, and I try a couple of doors, and there's no luck. And they had young twins that were my age, too, and so I didn't want to start ringing the doorbell and banging on the door. And so I just kind of went around to the backyard, and I remembered that they had a doggy door. And so I tried to go in their kind of service area and
see, Kelly, I have to tell you, you must be so slim, because I'm a curvy woman. I would never think of that, but you did.
Well, and I didn't make it through, so I'm not, perhaps I think I'm slimmer than I am, but I got stuck as I was going through, and they have 3 dogs that were just sitting there watching me as I'm stuck through this doggy door, and this was definitely one of those moments where I'm like, gosh, Kelly, what are you doing? It's like 4 a.m, and you're crawling through your friend's dog door, and, what are you doing with your life, and where is this going? So it was definitely one of those kind of reflective moments as I was stuck, with my face on the cold floor, with these dogs just breathing on me.
And thinking, have I come to this?
Yeah, exactly. Is this rock bottom, or, what's going to happen next? And so, fortunately, one of the dogs kind of hung in there with me, and he's a big little dog, had a lot of slobber, and he looks up behind me and kind of clues me into, if I kind of shimmy my body and turn around, I can reach up and unlock the door from that side. And so I was able to kind of eventually safely get in and grab my bags and make it back to the airport. But yes, that was quite the adventure.
That dog became your new best friend.
Absolutely. His name is Batman, so I said he's my hero.
That's really good. So Kelly, what did you, in your year of dating dangerously, getting back in the game, what did you learn about yourself that you think is something that most women could learn about themselves, that you wish they would learn too?
Yeah. So, coming out of divorce is so hard, and this is one thing that I had to kind of consciously make an effort, was to, not feel like something happened to me, or that I was a victim, or that my life was over, or that this is the worst thing that ever happened to me. I really had to kind of look at it and say, you know what, I have a fresh start. I have a place to completely start over. And a lot of people don't have that opportunity to, come out of something and just completely start over and make the best out of it. And so I think...
And you know what, Kelly, you say someplace I think it's in the earlier part of your book, that you understood when you were going through the divorce why some people stay.
Of course. I mean, I don't blame anyone who's staying, right? There's, pros and cons to both sides. And although this book may make it sound, fun and great opportunities, there's definitely, negative sides to both of those situations.
But you had the courage to step out and not do that.
Yeah, I think it's important for women to mourn the relationship, but to eventually find that place of optimism.
Kelly, I could talk to you for a little bit longer, but we're going to need to go. Fred just gave me the high sign. So,
okay.
So how can my listeners get a copy of Back in the Game, my year of dating dangerously?
Obviously, Amazon is the best place, and Audibles will be releasing the audio book here in about 2 weeks. And I also have my Facebook page, Kelly Green Author. And I love to hear from listeners and readers. So if anyone wants to reach out, my email address is kellygreenatx@gmail.com.
And that information, at least the Amazon page, is in today's radio wrap-up at victoriouswoman.com. Kelly, thanks so much for coming. Have a fabulous weekend.
Thank you so much, Annmarie. You too.
Thank you. And to you listeners, we just ran out of time with talking to Kelly Green. So I wanted to talk about the Olympics. I wanted to tell you some other stuff, but since I was in an Olympic mood, I have 2 quotes for you. The first one is from Dara Torres, and you might remember her as the record-breaking, then 41-year-old swimmer from the 2008 Olympics. And she said, "They may become harder to achieve, but your dreams can't stop because you've hit a certain age." And boy, do I second that. And the other one is from Michael Phelps, who just was so fabulous this week, and who's obviously practicing what he preaches in his swimming, because he said, "Nothing is impossible. With so many people saying it couldn't be done, all it takes is an imagination." Listen, I want to believe that for me and for you. I don't think all it takes is imagination, but if you pepper that imagination with action, I'm sure you and I can make that same kind of Michael Phelps magic happen for ourselves. So this weekend, think about what would be magical for you, and start imagining it. And it's going to be hot, so drink plenty of fluids, not alcohol, water. Thanks for joining me today, and come back next week for the Friday Happy Hour. Jen's on.
Thanks for listening to this Friday Happy Hour. Make sure you subscribe, rate and review today's show. And join us again next week for the Friday Happy Hour with Annmarie Kelly.